Well, hello, everyone. As the gentleman said, my name is Brian Randall, and I work at GitHub, but let's just get right into it. So we're going to talk about building a GitHub Copilot extension. So we'll talk about what they are. We'll show you how you build one, and I'll give you some links for more information. Simple agenda. Let's get right into it. So GitHub Copilot is your friendly neighborhood AI assistant that lives with you inside Visual Studio Code, Visual Studio, GitHub.com, and other wonderful development environments. And the idea is that you can ask it for help about what you're trying to work on. Well, naturally, the next logical step there is to give Copilot extra information about the extended family of tools and technologies you use to build solutions. So when we think about a Copilot extension, it's simply an integration to expand the functionality of Copilot Chat. Now, this may be something as simple as looking up additional data in your code repositories, or it can be something much richer where it integrates with an external system, say a service desk, say with your line of system applications, your diagnostics and monitoring systems, and allows you to perform commands and integrate that into your day-to-day development experience. Now, when we think about Copilot extensions, we've had a lot of great partners jump on right away. So back in May of this year, we announced them. So this is May of 2024 as an idea, as a concept. And then just last week at GitHub Universe, we came out and talked about the great progress. And here are just some of the vendors. If you look at these icons, you see things like Octopus Deploy, you see Launch Darkly, you see JFrog, and you see Supabase. All these are different bits and bobs of technology that developers use to build great solutions. The great thing is anyone who has a GitHub account can build their own Copilot extension. And that is the slides. Let's get right into building an extension. So we're going to jump over here to Visual Studio 2022. Notice I'm running the latest and greatest 17.12. And I've already created a repo, got a branch going, and I'm going to say File, New, Project. Now, you may be thinking, well, what is a Copilot extension? Well, it turns out there's a couple different ways to build these. We're going to build a GitHub app version. So we're effectively building a web service. So we're going to want to bring up a web API. And you'll see we'll use ASP.NET Core Web API. And we're going to give it a name, and we're going to call this DNC Live 24 for .NET Conf Live. I got my repo folder here, so I'm going to copy the path, and we'll put that in the location. We're going to tell it to create a new solution, and we'll just put them in there together since we're going to make this one little version. Now, you come in here, and you got lots of choices for your framework. We'll do .NET 8 because it's long-term support. I haven't tested yet all the .NET 9 stuff, so I'm just going to stick to what I know works. We do want HTTPS. We're not going to enable OpenAI support. We're not going to use controllers. We're just going to use the new minimal API, and we'll just go create. And let's see what Visual Studio gives us. Okay, we'll get rid of the overview, get rid of the What's New tab, and let's just open up program.cs. Well, there you go. This is a new minimal API, basically with a lot of ceremony removed, nice and easy. Now, that said, we don't want some of the things here. We're going to actually get rid of the comments. We're going to get rid of the redirects, and we're even going to get rid of this map get and that. Okay. Now, there's also this internal record. We're going to use our owns for our data types. Okay, so now we've got it kind of down to almost the bare essentials. Now, when you do this, you create a builder object, and you can add additional services. This would be a great place where you can start thinking about building maybe with Aspire and using some of the great technology that they announced there. What we're going to do is simply come in and set up a very simple request response. And we're going to start with just doing, whoops, wrong path. Let me just come over here. We're going to copy off my clipboard because, save some horrible typing. Okay, well, I don't know how to use that. There we go. Hello world, but how about hello Copilot? There we go. Now you'll notice that by default that's set to the root. And I can do something like, well, let's make this the info endpoint. Now the thing about this is if we go look over under our properties and launch settings, by default the template's set up to look for weather forecasts. So we're just going to come over here and replace this with info. And before we do anything else, it's important that we save and test. So we'll start with just clicking the default. I haven't changed any of the default settings. We're just going to see if this opens up in a web browser and shows me the message, hello, Copilot. Give it a second, and Bob's your uncle. Okay, so we know that part's working. We don't have compile errors. We know our basic web service works. Okay, but that's not very interesting. We want to be able to call this and test it with GitHub Copilot. Well, in order to do this, our web service has to be exposed over the internet. Well, how are we going to do that? Well, Visual Studio 2022 is going to take care of that for you. We've got a feature called dev tunnels, and I'm going to come over here and create a dev tunnel. Now, when I do this, it hooks it up to a particular account that I've set up with Visual Studio. In this case, it's got my Microsoft.com address. We're going to call this live demo, and this is just so I can identify it later. The tunnel type is going to be temporary because I just want it for this Visual Studio session, but I will need to make it public if I want it accessible for when I'm debugging with GitHub Copilot. So click OK. It's going to say it was successfully created. And so we're going to come over here. And if you look at the dropdown now, the dev tunnel is active. So we're going to run it one more time. And we'll show you what happens when you run it with a dev tunnel. It's going to open up our browser. And now it's going to give us a warning and say, hey, just be aware. This looks kind of funky. Just make sure you know this is a developer thing. I feel comfortable with this, so I'm going to click continue, and sure enough, it's ready to go. Now I'm going to copy that URL and save it off into Visual Notepad. And we'll just come over here, create a new file. There we go. And we'll save that away. Okay. So at this point, we've got debugging working. I can come over here and set up breakpoints when I need them. I've got a dev tunnel set up so I can talk to it from GitHub Copilot. Well, now I got to figure out how to make this work. So step one is I'm going to use an external library called OctaKit. Now, OctaKit is a library provided by GitHub to make it easier to talk to our APIs. And so we'll come over here to Tools, and we're going to come over and use the NuGet Package Manager. And we're going to open this up, and we're going to paste in a command, .NET add package OctaKit. Give it a second. Boom. Now, as you'd expect, we're going to need a bunch of different functions from the .NET framework and other parts of the system to help us. So I'm going to add some using statements up here at the top. There we go. All right. And you'll notice right now, I've got some OctaKit, diagnostics, headers, and MVC core. All right. Now, one of the things that's going to occur when you're working with a Copilot extension is you're going to know who the person is. So you're going to want them to tell us, hey, I allow you to talk to me via the Copilot and GitHub APIs. And so one of the things we'll do is we need to set up a callback endpoint, just like our info one. But this one is going to be a way for Copilot to call in and say, hey, are you sure you want this user to be authenticated? Now, this is a very simple example. You can do a much richer set of callback routines, in particular when you want to identify the user and correlate them to your own system. For example, if you want to talk to LaunchDarkly, LaunchDarkly requires you have an account and set up your system when you're using their feature flags as a service. So callbacks are a common routine you're going to want to set up. And so I've just got a very simple one, though, to make the demo work. Now, whenever, oh, look at that, Copilot's getting ahead of itself. One gets real excited. Now, the next thing you have to be aware of is we're going to be sending messages back and forth between Copilot and our web service. So we're going to need two additional supporting types to help us out with this. And I've already defined these. I'm going to add them to the bottom underneath app.run. Naturally, you can put these in their own classes. There we go. The first one is we have an internal class called message that's going to provide you information about the role and the content. So this is something we use as part of the conversation with Copilot. And then you see we have a payload object, which is going to be passed to us from Copilot, from the GitHub system into our web service. So now we just need to start building the actual handling. Now you see it wants to do that post back or that callback. That's not what we really want. We're going to do something like app.map post. It is correct there, But we're going to make this our default endpoint. In other words, when you hit that root endpoint, what are you going to do? And now it's thinking, okay, you probably want to do some async stuff with a payload. It's close. Let me copy in what it really wants to be, and we'll explain what's going on here. So we're just going to copy over this bit of extra code. And what's happening here is we're going to have an async method that gets an x-github-token from the header. So that's that first thing that's going to let us know that GitHub is talking to us. This is where we'll validate that it's valid, correct, and that we know who we're talking to. If this doesn't look good, then we can bug out. And then you see from the body, we're going to expect the payload in the form of that payload type that we define down here. So now we've got that set up, we can do a console write line and say, payload, or we could do something like debug.writeLine payload or something like that. Those are all nice options. And at that point, anything we do inside here is in the process of handling a Copilot request. All right, so what's the first thing we need to do when we really get into this? Well, naturally, we need to validate who the user is. So what we're going to do here is identify the user via OctaKit and get some information about them. So we'll come over here and we're going to add some code, get rid of that debug statement for now. And instead, we're going to replace it with this code. Now let's explain what's going on here. What we're doing is we're instantiating an instance of the GitHub client. And in doing so, we're going to instantiate an OctaKit product header value. Now you'll notice that I got this variable app name and it's not happy about it. And this is a critical aspect. When you create a Copilot extension, you're effectively creating, in this context, a GitHub app. GitHub apps have to have a unique name registered with github.com. And I'm going to show you how to do that. One of the things you don't want to do is kind of grab your name as soon as possible. So I'm going to come up top here, and we're just going to do a variable var app name equals, and I don't think Copilot chat's a good one. We'll call this Brian Randall live chat. And let's just do live chat demo. Okay, so that's going to be the name. And now that will then be here. Oh, got dreaded case sensitivity. All right. So we'll create that client, and then we'll take that token, and that token is going to have enough information to allow us to find out things like the current username. All right. Now that we've done that, we need to actually get the messages and add special system information. So one of the key things about talking to Copilot is you can provide it with context about how you want it to help the user and what is some additional context as far as the conversation. So the first thing we're going to do is insert a message here, and we're going to say, start every message with the user's name. So this will be kind of a polite thing to do. Then here's the critical aspect. Notice the role as system. We're going to say you're a helpful assistant that replies to user messages, as if you were Blackbeard the pirate. Now, we can have a lot of fun with this, but we'll start with Blackbeard the pirate. So this means that we'll get a little bit of pirate speak whenever we talk to it. Other than that, we're not going to augment with other data. However, once you know who the user is and you identify them and synchronize them to your own backend, you can look up help desk tickets, look up database information, whatever you want, right? It really is whatever your heart desires. At this point, once we have the core messages set up, we're going to have to take these messages plus whatever the user has asked, and we're going to hand that off to GitHub Copilot. To do that, we're going to instantiate an HTTP client. We're going to provide our access token. And one of the things this token is going to have also is whether we have permissions to talk to Copilot chat. And then we have this payload.stream equals true. This allows us to start sending responses back to the user as soon as we get the data. Then we have to actually post this message using the HTTP client, and we have to do it to a very specific URL. Turns out it's the api.githubcopilot.com chat completions endpoint. We're going to take the data from the user plus our extra system messages, squish them together, and send them out to the LLM. Finally, we have to get the response back from Copilot and then give it back to the user. Again, we could have an opportunity to look at it and augment it a bit if we want, but for now, we're just going to take the defaults. And looks like I did not clear my clipboard, so we'll just copy this over. And I'm doing this with clipboard inheritance to save you all from watching me type. And now we're going to send the response back. We're going to read it as a stream async and pass it back. And that is a complete Copilot extension. So starting at the top, we use the built-in builder, create a builder. We set up some endpoints, an info one, and then the callback one for security. The key takes place here in the post, and then we go through, process the messages, and ultimately send it off to Copilot with post as JSON async. All right, so let's build it. Make sure I have no compile errors. And survey says, looking good. All right, this is part one, the code. Now it has to come to the configuration. So we're going to jump over to my web browser, and you'll see I'm already logged in to Brian Randall, and I got my repo here. And so one of the things I'm going to do is come over here into my individual settings. Now, I'm building this as an individual, but your organization can build them as well. You can define them as being available just to your company, or you can go all the way and do like what the Microsoft Azure team has done and create one that's published in the marketplace, or do what the great folks at Octopus Deploy or LaunchDarkly or Docker or JFrog. You get the idea. So first of all, you can see which Copilot extensions you're using by going to applications and taking a look at your authorized GitHub apps. So I've got GitHub Copilot plugin, Copilot chat, and code spaces, but I don't have any custom ones. So I'll go to developer settings, and here I'm going to create a new GitHub app. Now, the first thing to do is create the name. Now, we check to see if other people are already using a name. For example, you can't take someone else's name, for example. So we're going to put this in here and see if this is okay. Looks like no one's using that. We'll double check. This is a demo that Brian created. Now, for the homepage URL, this can just be your repo in this context. Or it could be your company website if you're doing it for real, and specifically a website that has information about your extension. Now we need the callback URL. Now, if you remember, I saved this off here in Notepad. So we're going to paste this in and understand that, of course, this is going to be temporary. And instead of info, we'll say callback. Now we're going to tell it to expire authorization tokens, and we're also going to request user authorization. Come down a little further, we're going to uncheck webhooks because we're not using those. And then we have permissions. Now, remember that token gets passed into you on every call, and this lets you know what you can do if you wanted to talk to GitHub and github.com. For example, read data out of a repository, look at organization data. Well, it turns out there's one permission you must have, and that is you must provide read-only access to Copilot chat. So we'll set that up, and then finally, who can install your GitHub app? I'm only going to do it for myself, but if I did any account, I could share it with the world. And again, there's this progression of sharing with the world and then deciding you want to actually put it in the marketplace. More to that on that in another talk. So we'll create the GitHub app. Now, if we come over here, you'll see that there's an option for Copilot. So I'm going to click Copilot, and I have to come in here and enable agent. Now, the very first time you do this, you will get an acceptance message that says you understand what you're doing and there's some legalese. So I've already done this in testing, so I'm not going to see that. And then finally, I need the URL again. Only this time, I'm going to have it go to my root. Now, the inference description today is mostly used as a message that we'll see in Visual Studio Code. Hello from Brian's agent. But in the future, it's going to have additional impact on how your Copilot agent, Copilot extension behaves. So we'll save this. Now I've only got 2 steps left: install it and run it. So I'm going to click install. And notice it says, hey, you're installing this into your personal account. You've given it this current right. If you change the rights, it'll have to be reauthorized. And I'll click install and authorize. Now, it went to the endpoint, and it says you're about to connect there, but I'm not running. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to run my web service using Visual Studio and the dev tunnels. Okay, it's running. I'm going to minimize that, minimize this one, click continue. And notice it says you may close this window and return to GitHub. That's great. So I'll close that. And now I'll come over here and I'm going to come over here and look at the bottom here and you see that there's Copilot. One of the great things we've done is we brought Copilot chat in github.com to individuals and companies without an enterprise license. And so what we're going to do here is come over to the chat window. And you'll note that I've got this @ symbol. When you click the @ symbol, you'll see the available extensions that you have for your account. So I'm going to click my extension and we're going to say, hello there. Can you help me with C#? And we'll give it a second. And it says, ahoy there, Brian Randall. Consider me your trusty mate in the world of C#. What seems to be troubling you, matey? Well, that sure as heck looks like pirate speak to me. Now, of course, the great thing about it is I can go to Visual Studio, bring up GitHub Copilot chat, and you guessed it, if I type the @ sign, now sometimes you have to restart, but we'll see if this will work without restarting. I need help with debugging. It says thinking. Okay, that time we just got Copilot. So what we're going to do is here we're going to stop Visual Studio, close it, restart it. And I'm going to have one problem. Be aware of this. I made my dev tunnel temporary. So this is one of those things I want you to be aware of. Now, one of these you can make it permanent, but I always like to be very careful in using dev tunnels against things hooked up. So we'll come over to dev tunnels and we're going to go over to live demo. We're going to run it again. And it's going to give me a new URL. So I'm going to have to go update my app. We'll let this start up. We'll get the new URL. Okay, we can see that's different. I'm going to come back over here to Edge. Let's go to my settings. Oops, not chat, sorry. Go to settings, get rid of that. Come down here to my apps. Go to edit. We'll close this for now. And we're going to come down here to those URLs. Let's change this. Get rid of the info on that one. Save that change and then go into Copilot and we'll fix this one. Save it. Come back up here to my profile. Bring up Copilot. Do a new chat. What's a delegate in C#? Make sure it's still working. There we go. That's my extension. Now let's come over here to Visual Studio. Type the @ symbol. There it is. Can you help me with, whoa, can't type. I don't know if it understands gibberish. Can you help me debug with VS 2022 and dev tunnels? And look at it go. Look at that. It's giving you all sorts of information, talking about how to do it again like a pirate. Going one step further, if I go to Visual Studio Code, bring up the Copilot chat window there's my demo. And notice if we zoom in, you'll see there's that message text that I wrote. So that's kind of that helpful information. What does ++ do in C#? We'll ask another question. And we should get the response. All right, so you just saw me go through and build it, deploy it, make it available to VS Code, Visual Studio 2022, and GitHub.com, all in less than 25 minutes. Now let's wrap up the slides, give you some more information, and wrap this up. So you can build them 3 ways. I did the server only. I built this as a web service and made it available. Now that said, by making it a server-side extension, that does limit what I can do inside the editor experience. If you want to do more there, your other option is just to build a VS Code extension today and talk to Copilot from there. And you can do all sorts of rich interaction. Or if you're living the big dream, we want to do what some of our partners are doing, and that's building a hybrid solution where you build extension front ends that support both GitHub.com, Visual Studio, and VS Code. And today lights up special features inside VS Code only. Those are up to you, requires a little more work, but can provide a great user experience. I know you're going to want to do this yourself, so I've provided some great short links for you right here. Info about Copilot extensions, the docs. I have a learning pathway that's up on github.com. If you follow it step by step, you can build this exact pirate extension in a Visual Studio code space. Don't even have to install anything. And remember, everybody who has a GitHub account has some free code spaces available to them every month, docs on how to build VS Code Copilot extensions. There's the extensions marketplace, and there's info about GitHub Copilot itself if you haven't done it. Well, that was quite a bit of a whirlwind. Hopefully you learned something. Reach out to me. I'm octobrian at github.com. You can also find me on various social networks. I'm at Brian Randall on X, Mastodon, Blue Sky, etc. And with that, I'm going to send it back to the host and see if there's any questions I can answer before I go.
That is so awesome, Brian, what you just showed off. So awesome.